The archives open with a solemn declaration. The void will not take her, for she is more than scattered particles. She is a living being. Meetra Surik. Born sometime between the Great Sith War and the Mandalorian Wars, her origins are veiled in mystery. Taken as an infant like so many Jedi, her true parents and homeworld vanished into obscurity. The Jedi Enclave on Dantooine became her cradle of learning, where she trained in the discipline of the Force. In her earliest years, she studied under Kavar, a steadfast Jedi whose convictions would later shape her path. The halls of the Enclave echoed with quiet lessons and the measured cadence of practice, shaping patience, duty, and restraint. Yet the galaxy was not still. Rumors of armored marauders hardened into truth as the Mandalorians pressed outward, testing borders and will. The Republic trembled while the Council preached caution, and in that gathering storm, Meetra felt the pull of distant battlefields. Destiny curled like smoke at the edges of her life, warning that soon she would be asked to choose between quiet obedience and the cries of a galaxy slipping toward ruin. When the Mandalorian Wars erupted in 3976 BBY, Kavar defied the Council's command of neutrality and went to war, leaving Meetra bereft of her first teacher. Her tutelage then passed to Vima Sunrider, daughter of the legendary Nomi, who taught a perilous discipline, the art of severing a being's connection to the Force, tempered by grave warnings never to wield it without dire need. Years hardened into resolve. By the time Meetra rose to the rank of Jedi Knight, the Republic was collapsing under relentless advances. In 3964 BBY, a commanding voice rose among the Order. Revan, who rejected passivity and gathered like-minded warriors called the Revanchists. Meetra, stirred by duty and the memory of Kavar's conviction, left behind her prospective Padawan, Maikal, and joined their cause. Battle after battle proved her mettle until Revan entrusted her with command as one of his most loyal generals. The drumbeat of war drove her forward toward choices that would scorch worlds, bind fates, and carve her name into the galaxy with equal parts courage and sorrow. The Revanchists carved their legend in fire and steel, and among them, Meetra Surik rose as one of Revan's most trusted generals. In battle after battle, her command was steady, her will unyielding, and her loyalty unquestioned. When the final clash came at Malachor V, it was she who bore the gravest charge. Tasked with preparing the mass shadow generator, she lured the Mandalorian fleet into its range. Above the shattering world, Revan himself was locked in a duel with Manda-LORE, the ultimate, leaving her alone with the burden of choice. When his orders reached her, stark and absolute, she obeyed. The weapon unleashed unfathomable devastation. Gravity itself twisted into a consuming force, tearing ships apart, crushing fleets of Mandalorians and Republic alike. Malachor's crust split wide, its core ruptured, the planet reduced to a scarred ruin. The dead cried out through the Force, their anguish forming a wound so deep it bled into every corner of her being. To survive the unbearable weight, Meetra severed herself from the Force entirely, retreating into silence. What remained was not triumph, but desolation. Her name forever tied to the ruin of a world and the ghosts of countless lives. The silence after Malachor was heavier than any battle. Amid the wreckage of fleets and the shattered husk of a world, Meetra Surik carried a weight beyond comprehension. The Force itself had been torn, and in the echo of that wound, she shielded herself the only way she knew, by severing her bond to it, retreating into emptiness. Alone, she journeyed back to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, not in triumph, but in surrender. Before the Council, she did not plead her case. She came bearing guilt, ready to answer for Malachor, for the countless dead, for the choices of the Revanchists, and even for Revan himself. The Council met her silence with judgment. Her lightsaber was taken, the symbol of her oath cast aside, and she was declared no longer Jedi. Exiled, she left the halls that had once shaped her, carrying only the memory of what she had destroyed. The years that followed were spent wandering the Outer Rim, a hollow pilgrimage through dust and shadow. When word reached her that Revan had fallen into darkness, leading his own war against the Republic, the last fragile remnants of hope inside her withered. In despair and isolation, she abandoned the very principles that had once defined her, adrift without the guidance of her Jedi principles. Meetra watched from afar as the galaxy turned ever darker. Revan, once her leader and symbol of defiance, fell to betrayal. His apprentice, Darth Malak, struck him down, seizing the mantle of power. Captured by the Jedi, Revan was spared destruction, his memories wiped and his path reshaped. Reborn as a weapon against his own creation, he confronted Malak at the height of the Jedi Civil War. In 3956 BBY, at the Battle of the Starforge, he triumphed. Though the shadows of his lost past continued to haunt him, yet peace was fleeting. Burdened by visions and fractured memories, the redeemed Revan vanished into wild space, searching for the hidden hand that had steered his fall. Behind him, remnants of his Sith Empire endured, now fractured and consumed by infighting until three figures rose to claim dominion. Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, Darth Sion, the Lord of Pain, and Traya, reborn as Darth Traya, formed the Sith Triumvirate. But unity was fragile. Nihilus and Sion betrayed Traya, casting her down. She endured, while Nihilus unleashed devastation, beginning what history would mark as the first great Jedi Purge, a slaughter that shattered the Order and scattered its survivors across the stars. Now known only as the Exile, Meetra's life of quiet wandering was shattered when a rumor spread across the galaxy. It was Jedi Master Atris, the historian who had survived the Purge, who whispered that the Exile had returned to the Order. The lie was meant to draw out the Sith, but it also marked the beginning of her reawakening. In 3951 BBY, she was taken aboard the Republic cruiser Harbinger, bound for Atris's academy on Telos 4. Yet fate turned swiftly. The ship intercepted a distress signal from a derelict freighter, the Ebon Hawk. Two survivors were brought aboard, and with them came doom. One was Darth Sion, his decaying body bound by sheer will, who, aided by Sith assassins, slaughtered the crew as he hunted for her. Meanwhile, Meetra herself had been drugged and silenced by HK-50 assassin droids, agents of the Exchange seeking the Sith bounty placed upon every Jedi. But before she could be claimed, another survivor appeared, Traya. Cloaked in secrecy, she intervened, taking Meetra to the Ebon Hawk. Together, they escaped into the void, fleeing toward the desolate mining facility of Paragus, where the true weight of her return would begin to unfold. When Meetra awoke in the med bay of the Paragus facility, the silence of the mining station felt oppressive. Traya stood beside her, cloaked in shadows, claiming to be an exile like her, one who had been stripped of her ability to touch the Force. Yet as they spoke, something uncanny occurred. Their presence intertwined, and between them a vergence in the Force was born, reigniting the bond each had thought lost. The connection flowed like a current, binding their fates together in awakening powers long dormant. Not long after, another companion joined their flight, Attenrand, a smuggler whose sardonic charm concealed chains of regret. Found in prison for a minor infraction, he pledged his aid in escaping the dangers of the station. Their fragile alliance was tested almost immediately. The Exchange moved to claim the Exile, while Sith shadows drew closer, led by Darth Sion himself. The Harbinger pursued them into the asteroid belt, its cannons unleashing devastation. A chain reaction ignited the volatile fuel reserves, tearing Paragus apart in a cataclysmic blaze. Amid the chaos, the Ebon Hawk broke free, bearing Meetra, Traya, and Atten toward Telos 4, where suspicion, betrayal, and the first steps of her long journey back into the galaxy awaited. The Ebon Hawk broke free of the fiery wreck of Paragus, but their relief was brief. Pursued by Sion, they limped to Telos 4, only to be met with suspicion. The destruction of the mining facility had crippled the planet's lifeline. A Citadel station relied upon its fuel to sustain restoration efforts. Meetra, Traya, and Atten were accused of sabotage and detained, their fate uncertain. Yet investigations cleared them soon after, and they were released into a world still scarred by the Jedi Civil War. Seeking answers and the lost Ebon Hawk, the Exile allied with Choto Habat, an Ithorian leading Telos' restoration project. Habat, hunted by the corporate grip of Shirka, entrusted them with his cause. Together they struck against the corrupt syndicate, breaking its hold and exposing its ruthless schemes. In gratitude, Habat granted them passage to the surface, but fate was merciless. Their shuttle was blasted from the sky by Shirka's defenses, plunging them into wreckage. From the ruins, a new ally emerged, Bowdur, a Zabrak engineer who had once served under Meetra's command. Haunted by his role in designing the mass shadow generator, he now sought redemption, and his skills would soon prove vital to their quest. With Bao-Dur's guidance, the Exile learned that the Ebon Hawk had been moved to a pumping station hidden in Telos' polar region. Seizing a shuttle from Chirka's compound, she and her companions attempted the journey, only to be blasted from the sky once more. Pulled from the wreckage, they found themselves in the custody of the Handmaidens, pale warriors sworn to Atris. Taken to her secret academy, the Exile was forced to stand before the very master who had once pressed hardest for her exile. Atris had stolen the Ebon Hawk to lure her here, hoping to confront her in both philosophy and judgment. Their debate was sharp and unyielding, old wounds reopened in words that cut like blades. Atris demanded explanations, while Meetra sought understanding why she had been cast aside and what greater threat the Council had feared. In the end, Atris revealed a bitter truth. The surviving Jedi must be found not only to answer for the past, but to unite against the Sith who stalked the shadows. With the guidance of a recovered recording, T3M4 provided the locations of her former masters. For the first time since Malachor, the Exile had a purpose seeking out the Council, beginning with Vrook Lamar on Dantooine. The debate with Atris left scars as deep as any battle, but also a purpose. Meetra understood she must gather the scattered council, not only to learn the truth of her exile, but to unite them against the Sith shadow looming over the galaxy. Atris, cold and unyielding, directed her to seek out the surviving masters: Kavar, Zez-Kai El, Vrook Lamar, and Lana Vash, who had vanished into hiding. Before she departed, T3M4 revealed a recording of her judgment before the council, its echoes as sharp as the day she was condemned. Alongside it were coordinates to the Master's sanctuaries, the first leading her back to Dantooine. Upon arrival, the world was quiet yet scarred, its soil still bearing the wounds of the Jedi Civil War. At the Kunda outpost, she met Administrator Adare, who granted her limited aid in exchange for defending the settlers from constant threats. From there, she and her companions pressed into the ruins of the Enclave, fighting scavengers and mercenaries in Chirka's employ. Deep within, they discovered an archaeologist and the crystalline caves that glowed with promise. In that chamber, Meetra selected a new crystal, forging the heart of her reclaimed lightsaber. But darker trials awaited for mercenary forces gathered with intent to destroy the settlers' fragile government. The Exile readied for battle, unaware that Vrook Lamar himself would soon stand beside her. The defense of Kunda was fierce, but through determination and unity, the settlers prevailed. Meetra Surik fought side by side with her companions, her leadership steady as the militia stood against waves of mercenaries. At the height of the battle, Master Vrook Lamar emerged from hiding, lending his power to the struggle. With his aid, the outpost held, and the enemy was driven into retreat. For the first time since her exile, Meetra had found one of the council that had cast her out. Not in judgment, but as an ally. Dantooine was secured, and her path stretched further into the stars. Yet peace was fleeting. Back aboard the Ebon Hawk, the Exile was ambushed by Visas Mar, a Miraluka bound in service to Darth Nihilus. Cloaked in darkness and wielding crimson fury, she struck with deadly purpose, intent on fulfilling her master's command to capture Meetra. The duel burned with intensity, but the Exile's strength held firm. When victory was hers, she did not deliver death. Instead, she looked beyond Visas' servitude and sensed a spark of hope. Choosing mercy, she spared her would-be killer, offering redemption instead of oblivion. Visas, shaken, accepted her hand, and a fragile bond was formed, one that would grow stronger with every step of their journey. With Visas Mar spared and welcomed aboard, the Ebon Hawk pressed into the void, bound for Nar Shaddaa. During the voyage, a revelation stirred old memories. The archaeologist rescued on Dantooine unveiled his true identity, Meekle, once Meetra's Padawan prospect before she left for the Mandalorian Wars. His devotion had not waned through the years, and he now asked her to complete what had been left unfinished. With quiet resolve, Meetra agreed to train him, and he took upon himself the name Disciple. For the first time in years, the Jedi's future seemed to flicker with fragile hope. Nar Shaddaa, however, was no beacon. The smuggler's moon was a labyrinth of corruption, its streets choked with desperate refugees abandoned after the Jedi Civil War. Exploited by the Exchange, their misery was fuel for predators lurking in every shadow. It was here that a trap was sprung for the Exile, her enemies closing in with ruthless precision. Yet aid came from an unexpected hand. Zez-Kai El, a Jedi Master who had gone into hiding, had secretly hired the bounty hunter Mira to aid her. With their combined strength, Meetra struck against the exchange, bringing down 2 Quarren crime lords and toppling G0T0's flagship. The Exile's enemies were broken, but Nar Shaddaa's wounds ran deep, and the path ahead would lead her into darker trials. From the shadows of Nar Shaddaa to the void between stars, the journey pressed on. Aboard the Ebon Hawk, truths once hidden came to light. Meetra confronted Attenrand, having overheard fragments of his past whispered on the smuggler's moon. At first reluctant, he confessed at last. He had once worn the colors of the Republic, but in time defected to Revan's Sith Empire, trained not as a soldier, but as an assassin. He revealed, too, that he discovered his sensitivity to the Force in the moment he killed a Jedi, when the dying master touched his mind and unveiled his hidden potential. The revelation weighed heavily, but Atten admitted that since meeting her, he sought redemption, a path away from shadows. Meetra listened, her silence measured, and then offered him forgiveness. Where others might see only a murderer, she chose to see the possibility of change. If he so wished, she would train him as a Jedi, guiding him onto the path he had once destroyed. With that promise, a bond was forged, fragile yet resolute. Their next destination loomed ahead, Onderon, where her former master Kavar now advised Queen Talia. But the world was in turmoil, caught in the grip of civil war, and already the blockade of General Vaklu's forces closed around them. The Ebon Hawk broke from hyperspace, only to be met with hostility. Onderon was aflame with civil war, its sky sealed by General Vaklu's blockade. His fleet wasted no time, firing upon the Exile ship as soon as it appeared. Forced to retreat, Meetra steered for Dizun, the savage moon teeming with predators and tangled wilderness. It was here, in the shadow of jungle canopies and the echo of distant roars, that she discovered a Manda-LOREan stronghold. Within its walls stood Canderous Ordo, now known as Manda-LORE the Preserver, scarred by past wars yet unbowed, gathering what remained of his fractured people. Though once enemies across battlefields, he regarded Meetra with wary respect, tempered by his bond with Revan. His warriors bristled with distrust, their eyes sharp and hostile, but Manda-LORE stayed their hands. When Sith infiltrators and Vaklu scouts pressed upon their camp, Meetra fought beside the clansmen, her lightsaber flashing in unison with Mandalorian steel. Through battle, a fragile trust was forged. At last, Manda-LORE pledged his aid. He would help her breach Vaklu's blockade and descend to Onderon's capital, where her former master Kavar counseled Queen Talia. Yet the streets below were heavy with martial law, and in the heart of the city, unrest simmered like fire beneath stone. Onderon's capital seethed under the weight of martial law, its streets tense with unrest and soldiers watching every corner. The Exile and her companions did what they could to ease the suffering, but shadows lengthened quickly. At last, she reached her former master, Kavar, within the heart of Izis. Their reunion was brief, for danger closed in almost immediately. Colonel Tobin and his men struck within the cantina where they met, their ambush forcing Meetra and her allies to fight their way clear. The city's turmoil offered no safety, and Kavar urged her to bide her time until they could meet again. Driven from Aziz, the Exile turned her path toward darker soil. To continue her search for the Council, she traveled to Korriban, the ancient cradle of the Sith. Its air was heavy with corruption, its sands whispering with the voices of the dead. Drawn to the Shyrak cave, she stumbled into the tomb of Ludo Kresh, where illusions clouded her senses. Apparitions rose to test her, even one bearing the face of Darth Revan. Emerging shaken but resolute, she pressed on through the Valley of the Dark Lords and into the decaying Sith Academy. There, she found the truth. She sought Lana Vash, slain by Darth Sion, who now awaited her with challenge burning in his eyes. The shadowed valleys of Korriban weighed heavily upon Meetra as she stood within the crumbling academy. The stench of dust and death clung to the air, and from its heart emerged Darth Sion. His ruined body, sustained by agony and hatred, seemed unbreakable, his voice seething as he goaded her into combat. She raised her blade, but quickly realized the truth. This was not a duel she could win. The nexus of darkness here fed his strength, stitching his wounds closed as swiftly as she could carve them. Each clash rang with futility, until she understood that survival lay not in victory, but in retreat. With measured resolve, she withdrew, escaping the tombs of Korriban and returning to the Ebonhawk. As her ship broke atmosphere, a message pulsed through the holocom. T-3M4 had intercepted a transmission from Captain Kelborn of the Mandalorians, urgent and unyielding. General Vaklu's forces had launched a full assault on Aziz, their strength bolstered by Sith allies. Kavar was caught in the storm, and the fate of Onderon teetered on collapse. Setting her course for Dixun once more, Meetra prepared to return to war, knowing this battle would decide not only the fate of a world, but also her bond with her former master. The siege of Iziz raged as Meetra descended once more into battle. Riding within a modified Basilisk war droid, she and her allies pierced Vaklu's blockade, fighting through fire and steel until they landed within the embattled capital. The royal palace had already been breached, its halls echoing with the clash of soldiers and the shouts of dying men. Side by side with Master Kavar, the Exile fought with fierce determination, their blades a bulwark against the tide. Together they drove back Vaklu's forces, shielding Queen Talia in her throne room until the last of the rebels broke upon their defense. When the tide turned, Talia showed no mercy. Vaklu, cornered and defeated, was forced against the wall by her command. A firing squad ended his ambition, his dream of independence silenced in a storm of blaster fire. Onderon was saved, but the victory carried the bitter weight of blood and loss. Departing the world, the Exile felt the threads of fate tighten. Traya, ever watchful, strayed briefly from the company, reviving the broken Colonel Tobin and sending him to Darth Nihilus with a message that the Jedi would soon gather upon Telos. Unaware of her master's quiet betrayal, Meetra set her course for Dantooine, where the council awaited and where judgment would once again fall upon her shoulders. The ruins of Dantooine's enclave were silent as Meetra entered, the air thick with the ghosts of her past. Within those shattered halls, the surviving Jedi Masters, Kavar, Zez-Kai-El, and Vrook Lamar waited. Their eyes held no warmth, only grave judgment. They spoke of her not as a savior, but as a wound in the Force, a living scar left by Malachor V. They declared that her strength came not from harmony, but from draining life, friend and foe alike. In her, they feared the possibility of an end to the Force itself. Their verdict was harsh. She was to remain in exile, cut off once again, her fragile connection to the Force stripped away forever. Surrounded, powerless to object, Meetra felt the weight of their words press upon her. Yet before the ritual could be completed, the chamber erupted in lightning. Traya, casting aside all pretense, struck with merciless fury. The Masters cried out as her storm consumed them, their bodies collapsing lifeless upon the stones. The Exile fell into unconsciousness, her mind reeling in silence. When she awoke, the council was gone, their judgment turned to ash. Traya had vanished, fleeing to Telos, where her true nature awaited revelation. Telos Forest stood at the edge of ruin. Meetra arrived to find Atris cloaked in shadow, her heart poisoned by Traya's whispers. The duel that followed was bitter, master against pupil, their sabers flashing in a storm of light and regret. At last, Atris faltered. Stripped of her anger, she saw the truth of her fall, and in that moment of clarity, the Exile forgave her. Humbled, Atris revealed what she had concealed. Traya, her mentor, was none other than Darth Traya, the last of the Sith Triumvirate. She had departed from Malachor V to the shattered world where it had all begun. But Meetra's path could not yet lead there. The shadow of Darth Nihilus loomed, his fleet descending upon Telos. If she was to reach Malachor, she would first have to confront the Lord of Hunger. As Admiral Carth Onasi rallied the Republic Navy to hold the Sith at bay, the Exile prepared for the greater trial. With Visas Mar at her side, Manda-LORE and his warriors at her back, she readied to board the Ravager itself. Only by striking down Nihilus would Telos survive and the way to her final reckoning be opened. The Ravager loomed like a shadow over Telos, its hull scarred yet unbroken, its master hungering for life itself. While Admiral Carth Onasi's fleet battered the Sith Armada, Meetra and her companions launched their strike. With Visas Mar at her side, Manda-LORE and his warriors at her back, they boarded the Dreadnought. The corridors echoed with battle Mandalorians planting charges along supports and life-sustaining systems, blaster fire cutting through the dark as they carved a path to the bridge. There, the Exile confronted Darth Nihilus. His form was spectral, his voice a void that sought to drain the very essence from her and Visas alike. The duel was brutal, his hunger pressing like a storm against their spirits. Yet together, bound by trust and resolve, they endured. Visa stood firm against her former master, and with Manda-LORE's aid disrupting the Ravager's heart, Nihilus faltered. At last, the Lord of Hunger fell, his mask striking the floor with finality. The Ravager, crippled by explosives, tore itself apart in fire. With their mission complete, the Ebon Hawk turned toward Malachor V. There, on the broken world of her greatest sin, Meetra would face the last of the Triumvirate and the destiny she could no longer escape. The Ebon Hawk crashed upon the broken surface of Malachor V, the scarred world where Meetra's fate had once been sealed. As her allies pressed into the depths of the Sith Academy, the droids labored to awaken the mass shadow generator once more, a final act to end the planet's torment. But her companions, driven by loyalty, made the fatal mistake of confronting Darth Traya without her. Captured and broken, they became bait to draw the Exile deeper into the heart of shadows. Meetra carved her way through acolytes, her blade cutting paths through endless waves, until the Lord of Pain himself stood in her path. Darth Sion, his shattered body held together by pure hatred, struck at her with relentless fury. 3 times they clashed, 3 times he rose again, refusing to fall. Only when Meetra's words pierced his armor of rage did he falter. She urged him to let go, to release the agony that chained him to existence. At last, Sion yielded, surrendering to his wounds and the silence he had long denied. With Sion gone, only Traya remained. The last duel began as the silver-haired master, her body broken but her will unbending, rose with fury. With a single remaining hand, she summoned not 1, but 3 lightsabers, their blades floating around her like extensions of her wrath. The Exile advanced, knowing this final battle would decide the fate of the Force itself. Their duel burned with the raw power of the Force, sabers clashing in a storm of fury and resolve. Traya, broken yet unyielding, wielded 3 blades through sheer will, each spinning with lethal grace. Meetra pressed forward, her strike steady, her spirit unwavering. At last, with a single decisive blow, she severed Traya's remaining hand. The gesture was more than flesh and bone, it was the breaking of their bond, the final unraveling of a tie forged through hardship and betrayal. Wounded beyond salvation, Traya fell. On the cold stone floor, her voice softened, no longer sharp with venom, but heavy with prophecy. She spoke of the companions Meetra had gathered, of the fragile future of the Jedi, and of wars yet to come that would engulf the galaxy. She revealed whispers of Revan's fate, of his journey beyond known space in search of the Sith who had orchestrated so much of their suffering. When her words faded into silence, Meetra made her choice. She reactivated the mass shadow generator, and Malachor V was consumed. The Academy, the planet, and Traya herself were obliterated in finality. The Triumvirate was no more the Lord of Hunger. The Lord of Pain and the Lord of Betrayal were ended. For the first time in years, the galaxy could breathe free of their shadow. No longer the Exile, Meetra Surik turned her strength toward rebuilding. She aided in restoring the Jedi Order from the brink of annihilation, and helped worlds scarred by the Jedi Civil War and the Dark Wars begin to heal. Yet even as she labored, she felt apart from the Order she had saved. Among the older masters, suspicion lingered, their conservatism weighing heavily on her spirit. Though she had destroyed the Sith Triumvirate, her presence remained a reminder of wounds they could not forgive. In 3,950 BBY, her path shifted once more. The faithful astromech T-3M4 revealed he carried vital knowledge concerning Revan, but he would share it only with Bastila Shan, Jedi Knight, and Revan's wife. Together, they sought her out. Bastila lived in seclusion with her young son, still hiding from the scars of Nihilus's purge. When T3 relayed what he carried, it was both revelation and sorrow. Revan had uncovered the truth that Manda-LORE's war had been orchestrated by the true Sith, and his search for them had led him into the unknown regions. On the dead world of Nathema, he had been captured by a surviving Sith pureblood, proof that their empire had endured. The revelation struck deep. Knowing the danger the Republic faced, Meetra resolved to find him, to face the hidden empire that had remained in shadow for a millennium. Her journey was not yet over. After hearing T-3M4's revelations, Meetra and the faithful droid sought out Bastila Shan, who lived in seclusion, raising her young son Vanner in quiet exile. Their reunion was heavy with memory, for Bastila had not seen the little astromech since he departed with Revan and Canderous years earlier. Now, he returned with grim tidings. He revealed that Revan had uncovered the truth behind the Mandalorian Wars, that Manda-LORE the Ultimate had been manipulated by the Sith into attacking the Republic. Driven by this discovery, Revan parted ways with Canderous to seek the true enemy. His path ended in tragedy. The Ebon Hawk crash-landed on the world of Nathema, where he was captured by a surviving Sith pureblood, proof that the Sith had endured in secret beyond all reckoning. Haunted but resolute, Meetra vowed to follow his path. With sorrow in her eyes, Bastila entrusted her with Revan's Mandalorian mask, kept hidden for years, hoping it might one day restore his memory. When Meetra and T3 arrived on Nathema, the truth struck like a blade. The planet was utterly dead, its silence absolute, its skies heavy and void. No plants, no insects, not even the whisper of wind stirred the air. Empty cities stretched out like hollow monuments, their streets deserted, their walls bleached of life. The exile walked among the ruins, the stillness pressing on her spirit like a suffocating weight. T3 rolled beside her, its sensors flickering as it scanned the devastation. In the skeletal husks of the capital, they uncovered fragments of data, scattered records that pointed beyond Nathema's desolation. These traces spoke of another place, a fortress world thriving in the shadows. Dromund Kaas, the heart of a Sith empire hidden for 1,000 years. The discovery was as terrifying as it was certain this was not a remnant or imitation of Sith power, but the true empire itself, enduring while the Republic dreamed of peace. Dromund Kaas loomed beneath storm-choked skies, its capital alive with the pulse of an empire reborn. Meetra descended into Kaas City to find her worst fears confirmed. The Sith had not merely survived Chancellor Paltamo's purge after the Great Hyperspace War. They had flourished, building a dominion vast and entrenched, confident that the galaxy beyond their borders remained ignorant. Compared to this, Revan's empire, the Triumvirate, even Exar Kun's legacy were pale imitations. Entry into the city proved easier than expected. With credits and careful words, she bribed her way through the port authorities and slipped into the shadowed underworld. There, amidst smugglers and courtiers, she found a lead through a portly Sith named Sethel, aide to Darth Nihilus of the Dark Council. Sethel arranged a meeting with Lord Scourge, the Emperor's feared enforcer. Their first encounter bristled with hostility, sabers raised, the force tense between them, but words soon cut deeper than blades. Scourge spoke of Nihilus' opposition to the Emperor, of the madness consuming him. Vitiate, he revealed, was preparing a war of vengeance against the Republic that would doom both Sith and galaxy alike. To drive the truth home, Scourge revealed what Nathema truly was. The void world Meetra had walked was no natural wasteland. It had once been vibrant, teeming with life, until Vitiate drained it all in a catastrophic ritual to secure his own immortality. The horror of it lingered in every empty street and silent breeze. Faced with such knowledge, Jedi and Sith found common cause. Both understood that the Emperor's obsession threatened all existence. Their first step was clear. Revan, long imprisoned in Nihilus' dungeons, had to be freed if there was to be any hope of victory. For years, Revan languished in the dark cells of Darth Nihilus, his body broken but his will unbent. To free him, Scourge devised a perilous ruse. He went before the Emperor himself and denounced Nihilus as a traitor. The accusation summoned the wrath of the Imperial Guard, who stormed her fortress in brutal reprisal. Amid the chaos of clashing blades and firelit halls, Meetra and Scourge descended into the dungeons, breaking Revan's chains at last. When she placed the Mandalorian mask into his hands, memory crashed upon him like a tidal wave. Knight, General, Warlord, Savior, every fragment of his past surged back, overwhelming him until he collapsed. When he awoke, T3 played a message, Bastila's voice, and that of their young son Vanner, reaching across the gulf of years with love and longing. It was a fragile moment of hope in the midst of ruin, yet their escape was barred by Nihilus herself. The Dark Counselor descended upon them in fury, her power immense. Lightning tore through stone and steel, casting the chamber in searing brilliance. Meetra and Scourge fought with desperate resolve, but her strength drove them to the edge of defeat. It was Revan, rising from the shadows of memory restored, who turned the tide. Summoning strength long dormant, he met her power with his own, and in a storm of light and will, struck her down. With Nihilus fallen, the three stood united at last. Whatever lay ahead, their purpose was one: to confront the Emperor and to end his shadow over the galaxy. The city above reeled in chaos as Vitiate's troops locked down every street, purging the Dark Council with ruthless precision. Amid the upheaval, Meetra, Revan, and Scourge slipped into the Imperial Palace, Scourge's rank granting them initial passage. But their ruse faltered when a guard's gaze fell upon Revan's mask recognition, sparking memory of the Jedi who had once stood in those halls. Alarms blared, blades ignited, and the palace erupted in battle. Shoulder to shoulder, Meetra and Scourge cut through waves of Imperial guards, their sabers flashing through smoke and blood, while Revan pressed forward, drawn inexorably to the throne room. There, he confronted the Emperor himself. The clash was titanic, the air warping under the collision of powers beyond mortal comprehension. Yet for all his might, Revan faltered, brought to his knees beneath the Emperor's overwhelming will. Racing through blood-soaked corridors, Meetra reached the throne room to find her friend broken before Vitiate's hand. In that instant, she faced an impossible choice: strike now, ending the Emperor while his focus wavered, though it would mean Revan's death, or deflect the killing blow and save him, allowing the Dark Sovereign to recover. She chose the latter. Her blade rose to shield Revan, turning aside Vitiate's fatal strike. Revan lived, but their only chance to destroy the Emperor slipped away. Vitiate surged back to full strength, and the battle's tide turned beyond redemption. In that moment of despair, betrayal struck. Lord Scourge, face unreadable, drove his crimson blade through Meetra's heart. The act cemented his loyalty in the Emperor's eyes, but it was more than treachery. In cold pragmatism, he judged her choice as weakness, a fatal error that doomed them all. Meetra collapsed, her light extinguished, even as Revan was subdued, bound in stasis to endure centuries of torment. Yet death was not the end for her. Meetra Surik did not fade into the Force. She lingered, her spirit refusing surrender, guarding Revan across the ages, whispering strength into his mind during endless captivity. Across centuries of rising empires and falling wars, she remained a silent sentinel, her sacrifice echoing beyond time. The war that followed was the very conflict Traya had foreseen: the Galactic War, vast in its destruction, terrible in its scope. It was only after those flames had burned across the stars, and after Vitiate was at last defeated, that Meetra Surik's vigil came to an end. For centuries she had lingered, binding the fragments of Revan's broken spirit, guiding him through torment until at last his soul was released. Only then did she allow herself to fade into the Force. No longer bound by grief or sacrifice, she became one with the current that flows through all things, her presence forever imprinted upon those she had touched. Her legacy endured in the lives she saved, the companions she redeemed, and the fragile survival of the Jedi she had helped preserve. Meetra Surik, once exile, once general, bore the burden of Malachor, faced the shadows of the Triumvirate, and gave her life so others might endure. Her story was one of sorrow and sacrifice, but also of hope, a light carried into the darkness, never to be forgotten.